Okay, well, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kaylee Howarth, and I am the Training and Communications Coordinator at Marigold Library System, and I'm really happy to be able to host today's webinar with Brittany and Joanne, a couple of, well, graduates now, right?
Yeah.
From the SAIT
Yeah.
LIT program. Before we play the recording of their presentation, I will just let everybody know, again, feel free to communicate with us or each other through the chat. But if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit those through the Q&A. And then at the end of the presentation, all three of us will be back on screen and we will go through all of your questions and get those all answered. I have the closed captioning turned on. If you want to turn that on or off for yourself, on your toolbar, you should have a little CC button. So you can turn those off or on for yourself. And yeah, I think we are good to go. So we are going to now turn off our cameras and mute our mics, and then we will play the recording.
Hi, I'm Brittany.
And I'm Joanne, and we're here to share with you our experience on a student club executive board during COVID times. And I will just share my screen with everyone so that we can start our presentation. And take it away, Brittany.
So again, I'm Brittany Garchar, a very recent grad of the Library Information Technology or LIT program from SAIT. And I was the event planner for the 2020-2021 LIT Club. I was drawn to being an executive member because of the chance to work with my fellow executives, have some fun, be a part of something, and because my fellow presenter, Joanne, had such passion in continuing the club.
And as I've introduced myself previously, I'm Joanne, also a recent SAIT LIT grad and former vice president of the LIT Club. I saw a tremendous opportunity to socialize and network with industry through the LIT Club, and that is my reason for getting involved and keeping the club active through the past academic year.
So we've been graciously invited to describe our experience in the SAIT LIT Club. As stated earlier, we're both executives, and along with 7 other second-year students who became executives, we had a goal of keeping the club going for our second and final year in the LIT program. We faced some challenges with being online with COVID restrictions, but there were a lot of benefits that came from the online experience as well. We would like this presentation to not just be about our experience, but a way to show how clubs and events can work online, how they are beneficial to community, and to provide some links to games that we found that fun, very engaging, and useful in keeping our club members engaged as well.
Before we begin our presentation, in the spirit of respect and truth, we honor and acknowledge the sacred gathering place, Mohkinstsis, which today we also refer to as the City of Calgary, and the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda First Nation tribes of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. We acknowledge the members of the Métis community and specifically the Métis Nation Region 3. We are all treaty people who make our homes in the traditional Treaty 7 territory of Southern Alberta. Now we'll begin with Brittany outlining some background information on our club.
So we began our planning of our September 2020 to April 2021 LIT Club in February of 2020. So at this point, we didn't know that the pandemic was going to happen, and we only knew that we wanted to make sure that the club continued on. When mid-March came and we were told that we're going to be online and that there was actually a possibility that the entire year was going to be online, the executives knew that the club environment was going to be even more important for its members to stay connected and socialize outside of class time. The first thing that we talked about was that we wanted to reach out to the incoming first-year students, and we were determined to do that in any way that we could. We decided that the best way to do that was to be part of the incoming orientation, but we didn't really know how to do that either. So we discussed a few of us discussed that maybe we could attend it, but we also communicated with our faculty advisor, Dr. Donna Campbell, and another one of our instructors, Danny DeCastro, and we all decided that providing a recording that could be played at orientation was the best plan for us. So a few of the club executive members got together and created the video recording. It gave us a chance to introduce ourselves, the club, and a few ideas that we had for the year. We even provided a Word document that contained some tips on online learning that we obtained during our last month and last month and a half of our last semester, which we would have really appreciated ourselves. And of course, it ended up with us asking them to join the club and inviting them to our first event, which was the icebreaker. Around that same time, we also emailed our fellow second year students to ensure that they knew that the club was happening, and we wanted to make sure that we were well positioned to hit the ground running come September. So we were very lucky that we had a great support from SAIT LIT, which is the Student Association. We were very new at being club executives. We weren't sure if we needed to how to put on an official SAIT LIT club event, and we were even more unsure about how to make sure our club was an officially registered club. SAIT LIT provided support for everything. Every question that we had was answered, and we gained a lot of knowledge about the workings of the club that we could also pass on to our next year's executives. Being an executive in a SAIT LIT club also came with the ability for us to add our roles to our official transcript and co-curricular records. This was something that none of us knew about, and it was very nice to know because it showed that we were recognized for the work that we were putting in throughout the year. We also found that you could add more than one co-curricular record. We could add one role to your co-curricular record. So if you were, let's say, an event planner and a secretary, both of them could be added. This information was also bonus to entice first years to join the executives if they were on the fence about it. When it came to gaining members, we had a goal of having between 20 to 30 members join, which would be approximately half of the first and second year classes combined. Within the first month, we had 18 members, and every month the numbers seemed to continue to build. A benefit to being online is that we were also able to open the club to distance students who, because of the events usually being in person, had never been a part of it. By the end of our second year, April 2021, the club had 51 members, which included first years, second years, and distance students. I think I can speak for our entire executive board when I say we were very happy, excited, and proud that we exceeded our goal. As I talked about earlier, a group of us started talking about the club in February of 2020. Within a few weeks of the initial discussions, there were 7 second years who became the executives of the LIT club almost immediately. There was really no debate over who was going to do what role, and we either picked or fell into them, and everyone was perfect for their roles. When the school year started and we had our first event, the icebreaker, Joanne mentioned to the first year students that we were going to have junior or shadowing positions so that they could be a part of the decision making within the club, a part of putting on our events, see how we conducted the club affairs, and then be confident in taking over for the following year and making the club their own. The opportunity of shadowing enticed 3 first years to join the executives, which not only was great for us to get to know them, but it also put a lot of us at ease knowing the club would continue once we graduated. The first year executives were also so amazing and an integral part of the events continuing when the second year executives were busy on their practicum placements.
A critical concept behind our desire to move the LIT club forward, even during gathering restrictions and lockdowns, is that of the third place. This concept was first articulated by Ray Oldenburg in his 1989 book entitled The Great Good Place. Oldenburg defines the third place as a generic designation for a great variety of public places that host the regular, voluntary, informal, and happily anticipated gatherings of individuals beyond the realms of home and work. Home, being the first place, often is a place of retreat from the world, and work, the second place, is often the obligatory space to earn a living. Common examples of third places are coffee houses, pubs, and libraries. These spaces fulfill a social need that is lacking in the other two. So what happened to our third space? We all needed a space where we could continue to see and talk to each other about anything and everything, whether it was school or just random things. We all needed a place to talk. When we were first years, we were lucky to be in person and were able to spend time together and get to know each other before and after classes, at lunch, and during breaks. Once we were online, we didn't have the opportunity to see each other casually anymore. And for us, the Lit Club became an opportunity to create this third space online, have fun and unwind and continue to connect with each other. We also realized that a third space wasn't just a physical space, but an intellectual and social one as well. When we were a few weeks into our fall term, a few of us commented that our assignment requirements seemed to be more difficult to understand than in first year. Eventually, we realized that the assignment rubrics contained the same level of detail they had in first year. What had changed was our ability to casually discuss the assignments amongst ourselves outside of class time. It turns out that our third space was important for our mental health and also our grades. Isolating at home, our first and second spaces quickly melded into one, and we knew that our third space was going to have to as well. We couldn't meet in person, even when restrictions allowed up to 10 people. We knew we would have more than that coming out to events, or at least we hoped so. And we all wanted to ensure everyone was safe. We used the LIT Club to provide a space that was open, welcoming, and fun, and a place where everyone can socialize or just sit and enjoy the company. In doing so, we created our third space. And now Brittany is going to discuss the goals we had as we formed the past year's executive board.
So we had several goals that we wanted to achieve and we're excited to meet for our second academic year when we began organizing our LIT Club. The first was to increase membership and participation. In our first year, we saw a lack of interest in the club membership. There were many reasons behind it, some being that there was not much of a draw to the club. Some of the events took place hours after the first year's classes ended, making it so we didn't really want to wait around or come back to class or school after, a couple hours. For our year as executives, we wanted to raise our membership and ensure that we had as many people participating as possible. As I mentioned before, that by the end of the year, we had 51 club members, and there was never an event that we didn't have a member come to. A second goal was the collegial relationship between first and second years. In our first year, there was also a clear discordance between first and second year classes. When we started to discuss our vision of our club, we not only wanted to increase membership, but also wanted to provide social connections and encourage peer support amongst all LIT students, despite what year they were in. Several of us realized that the best part of our SAIT experience is the friendships and networking. Our main goal was to include as many of our peers as possible to share in that. The third goal was social connection and peer support. When we found out that we were going to be online for what we thought was just going to be the fall semester of 2020 and turned out to be our entire last year, the goals of social connection were even more prominent and important for the executives to ensure the club had. It was important for us to ensure that we had an event scheduled at least once a month so that those who wanted to have that social connection had the opportunity, and the games we were planning would help us put us in the third space that we needed. One thing that we found, especially with our second year class, was that we all missed the before and after school class chats and random hangouts. Because we were online, we felt like we had to schedule to meet each other in order to have the social interaction. It was very hard for a lot of us, and we really appreciated the LIT events because that enabled us to have the social interaction, have support for one another, either in terms of school or general life happenings, and even have some fun and take our minds off everything that was happening around us. Our club president was a huge advocate for more time to socialize and provided a great addition to our event when he introduced what we called LIT time. This happened every week and provided another time and space for people to get together to just relax and chat. Our last goal was the professional networking and connecting with industry. We all understood that in some way we would all be working together, maybe not in the same organization, but in the same field. Having connections in the LIT Club would turn into connections in the professional industry, and that would be beneficial in many ways. As Joanne had mentioned before, every year there was also an industry night that was put on by our academic chair, Sandra Lee, with the help of the LIT Club. This event connected students with industry professionals and once again was a great way to help us professionally network. The LIT Club members were also invited to the Foothills Library Association events and were given free memberships. Both of these provide great networking opportunities and an opportunity to be part of a larger club. And now Joanne will show you the timeline of our events over the past year.
Thanks, Brittany. This is our timeline in a nutshell. We made sure that we had an event every month, whether it was playing games or just having discussions about things that were happening. We wanted to make sure that there was one evening where we could all de-stress in a fun and safe environment. We held these events toward the end of the month and held our executive planning meetings at the beginning of the month. Most of our planning was a grand experiment. So we found that meeting once a month as a board was a great way to assess our successes and to make changes to what didn't work as well as we progressed through the year. Beginning in November, LIT time was held once a week through to the end of April, and we only missed 2 weeks due to other circumstances like second year practicums. It was a little tricky to find times that worked with both first and second year class schedules, but attendance ranged from 4 to 12 people every week. So we knew these unstructured chat times were important, and we did our level best to ensure that they happened regularly. Now Brittany is going to provide some detail regarding the different types of events we held.
Thank you, Joanne. So as I mentioned earlier, our first official event was the Icebreaker event. Since 2011, before the club was even made in 2014, the Icebreaker had been held as a way to introduce first and second year students to each other. So there wasn't a clear line between the two. In our experience, the event usually was attended by the second years, but not really by the first years. It was also an in-person event, which usually consisted of pizza and board games, and had been hosted on a Friday night in October. We knew our event was going to be completely different. We had our event on Zoom, where we were pleased to have over 20 people attend. In my opinion, I think it was due to our video during orientation that we had a great mix of first and second year students. We even had some of our instructors pop in to say hello at the beginning, which was great. It was a couple hours long, and we were all given the opportunity to talk about a number of different things and get to know each other better. As mentioned earlier as well, the LIT time was something that our president really wanted to have once a week. It was a very casual space where it consisted of conversations about life in general, things that were happening. Some people just came and sat and listened and knitted or crocheted as they were there. It was a great place to go if you just needed some human interaction but had no obligation to participate in conversation or play any games. It usually lasted about an hour, but it sometimes went longer depending on if people had time or if the conversation continued. And the attendance, as Joanne had mentioned earlier, varied from week to week depending on the assignments or other priorities, but there were always at least 4 participants there. So another major event that took place was an auction. So the auction we put on came about because we were actually offered 2 items by one of our instructors as items that we could use to raise money for the club. When we were offered the items, our first thought was to have an auction, and we didn't know if this was even possible. So we contacted SAIT LIT to ensure it was something that we were actually able to do. They said, yep, go for it. So we started planning. And our main goal of the auction was to raise money for the next year's LIT club. And hopefully they could use that money for in-person events. Joanne and one of our first year executives came across a free app, 32 Auctions. It provided us with a platform where we could easily upload an image of an item, write descriptions, and track who was bidding and who won the bidding of each item. There was an ability to purchase a subscription of it, which allowed you to put more pictures and do a few other things. But for what we wanted, the free version was perfect. In order for people to participate on bidding, they did have to create an account for 32 auctions, but because it didn't cost anything, we actually had quite a few people participate. In order to make the auction worthwhile, all the executives got together and they donated items, and we ended up about 11 items in total. The event was extremely successful, and we ended up raising $182 for the club. The first year executives were very excited and were quick to express that they wanted to do another auction in the following year. So for the movie night, we actually hosted one successful movie night at the beginning of the year, where we accessed a movie through SAIT's Reg Earhart Library database, and we used our event platform of Discord and had one of our executives share their screen as the movie played. Overall, it was actually quite a good, successful movie night. Everyone really enjoyed it, but it also didn't really provide us with the opportunity to discuss a lot or interact a lot, which was what most people were looking for. One suggestion for a movie night actually came from the Foothills Library Association events that Joanne and I went to, where they actually watched the movie beforehand and then hosted an event where they discussed it more. And Joanna is now going to provide you with some insight into our more popular game nights.
So there were a few different games that we played during our event nights. However, the biggest challenge for us in terms of our online games was that they needed to be free, not only because at the time we didn't have a lot of money in the club account, but it was also going to be hard to have an account for the club that was going to be passed on from year to year, especially if a credit card was required. The club is not its own legal entity, and so it would be up to an individual to purchase the game. Another consideration was that a lot of the free games had a limit of how many people could play. The limit was usually 8 to 12 people, and most of our events consisted of 8 to 10 people, so it was easy for us to play many of the free games available. If there happened to be more people in attendance, we simply split the games into two groups in two different channels in Discord, and everybody played one of the two games. So I'll just give a brief outline of each of the games that we tried. All Bad Cards is a game similar to Cards Against Humanity. Simply, the participants draw cards from a deck and answer questions based on what they have in their hand. The game has some rude and vulgar statements, and so it was fairly well received, but not universally well received. So we only played that game once. And it's just good to note here that All Bad Cards actually has a Not All Bad Cards option, which has more family-friendly or, say, co-workers friendly games. So if we did do it again, we'd probably opt for that one. Among Us is basically a game of survival and mystery solving, and it was really trendy last year. So it requires an account. So we did play it once for those who had an account. For those who didn't, the others played Scriblio. But basically, you have to, in Among Us, you find there's an imposter. One of the players playing is an imposter, and everyone has to find out who that is before the imposter kills everyone else playing. Kahoot is basically online trivia. It's an evaluative tool used by a lot of teachers and instructors. You do need to create an account for it, and it is important which account you choose because it's free, but you can choose an individual or an organizational account. And if you choose an individual account, you can only have about 10 people playing your game, whereas an organizational account, you can have 150 people playing. So we chose that organizational account just to accommodate if we had more than 10 people playing, which sometimes we did. You can pick a pre-made Kahoot from a number of different subjects, like, for example, Disney princesses, or you can customize your own, which Brittany did for our Halloween and Christmas events, and those were really fun. And I think it was worth the effort that she put in to create those games. So back to Scriblio, that was our hands down favorite game. We played most of the time. It's basically Pictionary, where one player is given a prompt to draw. And then as they're drawing, everyone tries to guess what they're drawing, and everyone can see everyone's bad guesses and spelling mistakes. And it was just really enjoyable for everyone. So that one was sort of the game of choice that we gravitated to. And I think we ended up playing it at our final event of the year as well. So the last event I'll discuss is our industry event. This was the primary event that in-person lit clubs would co-host with faculty. And it's a huge night, not just for the lit club, but for lit students in general. Professionals from the library and records management field come in and talk to students in small groups about the industry and provide tips or information for us heading out into the field. And there was some doubt whether or not we would even have this event this year, but happily it went ahead and we had 35 attendees, so it was quite successful. We did help our academic chair prep for the event by testing out a couple of platforms, and in the end, Zoom was chosen for its breakout room functioning and reliability. The event functioned somewhat like speed dating, where students would have 8 to 10 minutes to talk with an industry rep before moving on to other reps. The LIT Club also helped market the event to our fellow classmates and help get those 35 attendees there. Remo is an interesting platform that we also tested. We didn't use it. It remains on our watch list, though. It's a paid app, and it has some very interesting webinar or conference functions like digital business cards. It also allows participants to move amongst breakout rooms at will, which is something we haven't found in any other platform. We did not use it for our industry event because we had difficulty getting emails past the firewalls with our free trial version that we had. So to sum up our event takeaways, gamification was the primary draw for attendance and for the main events. LIT time was great because people who wanted a casual environment enjoyed that, but I think the gamification drew people into our monthly meetings at a greater rate. We also had success with varied communication options. Having multiple ways to communicate in the platforms we chose was really important. For example, chat and audio and video conferencing. Those with poor Wi-Fi connection could turn off their cameras and mics but still communicate with the chat. We will discuss the platforms in just a few minutes, but Discord became the primary choice for our game night events, in part because of its multiple communication options. None of the events were ever strictly structured. During game nights, we would often let the conversation carry on until it seemed like a naturally good time to start a game. And it often did. Everyone was quite happy to get together and chat. And participation in games or conversations was never mandatory. And some members would simply sit and listen to the conversation or watch the games being played. Brittany is now going to give you some detail about Zoom and Discord.
Thank you, Joanne. So there are a lot of platforms out there to use for an online community, and we started our club journey with Zoom. So Zoom is a platform that we had been using for classes, and we're somewhat familiar with the functions. So it was actually very reliable for connection-wise for our users, and it gave the ability to share screens, do polls if we wanted to, and it could also transcribe the conversations. Although our club events were moved to a different platform, our executive meetings were actually always conducted through Zoom. The reason we decided to move away from the Zoom for our events was that the link needed to be saved or accessed from somewhere, whereas Discord, which was our chosen platform for our monthly events, could be accessed easily. For example, I saved the link to my Discord in bookmarks. Joanne just started typing in Discord to the web browser and it popped up. I also think that one of the reasons why we didn't use Zoom is because we did use it for classes a lot. So we really didn't enjoy having to sign into it for something that was more fun and casual. With Discord, as Joanne stated earlier, it became the platform that we used for events because it did have a lot of different channels like voice channel, video call, and text channels. It was also very easy to access, as I mentioned before. You didn't have to constantly create links or save a recurring link anywhere. Although many of the executives were not familiar with Discord, we ended up signing up for it, and thankfully we had one of our executives that was a master of Discord, so he was very good at showing us kind of the ropes of Discord and how to get around it and do certain things. And we also came to realize that it was not only a great platform to utilize for our club, but a lot of the first year students were actually using Discord to connect with each other. So a lot of great features that we found, along with the things that we've already mentioned, were that it had the ability to have your cameras and mics on and off, which was good for us because, again, as Joanne said, we didn't want it to be something where you mandatory had to have your camera on or your mic on. It was also easy to sign into, and it could be left open and used to communicate while we play games in a different browser. Discord also allowed you to set permissions, so a few people could be administrators. There was also, as Joanne had mentioned earlier, chat and video channels that were not in the same space like in Zoom, but it was really easy to move between them, and it gave a lot of people who didn't have the ability to talk on mics be able to chat to us as well.
Okay, so I'll give a really quick little description of the two platforms we tried for the LIT times, which were, as we've said before, less structured, far less structured. Jitsi Meet was a platform we tried for tea time. Our club president really liked the idea because it's an open source tool, completely free. However, when using the platform, there were quite a few people who had trouble with their connections, and this seemed to be a common thing. So we soon gravitated to Google Meets for LIT time. Google Meets had better connection quality and a lot of the same features as Zoom and Discord, And the users could share their screens, do polls, and we had live captioning if we wanted or needed that. Again, an accessibility issue. We also decided to use Google Meets for LIT Times for inclusivity. To join a channel in Discord, you must have an account. And there were several club members who did not want a Discord account. So Google Meets was easy for absolutely everyone. And now Brittany's going to talk about some of our challenges.
So we did have a few challenges coming into the club executive roles. So we already talked about a few, but communication was one. So unlike being in person, we couldn't just talk to people in the hallways, promote the club and its events in our shared LIT areas. Especially for our first event, we were very thankful that we had permission to pop into first year classes in the online Zoom meetings. And we also used second year classes to promote our events. However, we found that that wasn't really ideal because we didn't want to take up a lot of class time. And it was also hard for us to find the time to go into, especially first year classes who didn't have the same time schedule as us. So we ended up using our SAIT emails as our main and most centralized method of communication, but we really would have benefited from a centralized free space that could have been easily accessed without needing anything but perhaps your SAIT ID, such as maybe a website where everyone knew that they could go and see and access information about the club and upcoming events and anything that they needed. The first years are actually who are taking over the club have voiced several ideas that we would have loved to come up with, such as utilizing different Microsoft Teams elements and creating a newsletter to send out to everyone. The LIT Club did have a club Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook page that we mostly utilized for fun memes, sharing interesting things of the library world, and it was another place to connect with those in our program. However, we didn't utilize it for much for events or any other communication for the club because we found that not everyone followed the platforms and we all wanted to see each other and not just do social media chat. So even though Facebook has the ability to use voice calling, there was more benefits found with the Discord server. In terms of membership, as we stated before, there seemed to be a divide between the first and second years, and there was no shared classes and only a small lab as a shared space. So our first challenge was to make sure that we communicated to the first years and created that interest for them to be part of the club as members. Especially since that we knew that they were starting the program online and didn't have the advantage of meeting their classmates, we thought that it would be less challenging for them if they joined the club and then could meet a lot of different people and possibly get to know each other better. And we also knew that they were going to be our successors in the club. So that was a huge thing for us to think about as well. In terms of the budget, we when we took over the club, we didn't even know we had a budget, but we actually found out that we had $150 in the bank, which was nice. We didn't really have much of a challenge in terms of budget in the sense that we actually, because of virtual events, had no expenses. But if the club was in person, they would have had more challenging because they relied a lot on like donations if they were going to have events and provide food and beverages for everyone. But like I said, for us, we didn't really have any expenses, which was kind of nice. We did have a discussion about purchasing some online games such as Jackbox, doing some escape rooms and events utilizing third parties such as the Tiny Campfire. But the challenge in that was that the club, again, like Joanne had mentioned earlier, it's not a legal entity. So any games that were purchased would be owned by an individual for use by the club, and the club would be in the position to reimburse the purchaser. However, it was a lot more difficult to pass on the account from year to year because there usually was a credit card that was needed to do as a payment for the game. In terms of platforms, it was challenging for us to find the right one that worked for us because no platform met all of the needs that we wanted to meet. Discord, as we said before, became the closest. We did find that we discovered, like as we discussed earlier, it was beneficial to have 2 platforms. So one for our monthly events, like we said, and then one for our weekly LIT times. And as much as we tried to be inclusive to everyone, one challenge that was faced all the time was that not everyone's home Wi-Fi quality was the same. So some people could not attend. Some people could attend but couldn't have their cameras on, or there were times when people were attending and got kicked out because their connection went down. Unfortunately for us, that was not something that was in our hands to control or fix. But although there were challenges, we did find that there were so many more benefits that outweighed them. We can only speak to our personal thoughts and how the club benefited us. However, we know from conversations from other members that they did benefit in much of the same way. And Joanna is going to speak about those benefits now.
The club gave us the possibility to connect with everyone in the LIT program. This created a system of support from fellow students, club members, either with classwork, personal life, or club events. It was a space to go to socialize, especially for those who really struggled with having less or no interaction with other people. There are several students in our class and in first year who live alone, and sometimes the LIT club social events were the only social events they'd have that a whole week. Talking about school in an informal environment was also a stress reliever for many. We provided a place to go when there was absolutely nowhere to go. Especially in Discord, which is always on and always open. There was almost always somebody hanging out in there, and people could drop in and out whenever they wanted to. Networking with each other and as future colleagues and with industry was made possible through the structure of the Lit Club. We co-hosted the industry event as we described earlier, and we also had a web presence on the SAIT LIT webpage through which a representative from a local oil company was contacted us because they were looking to advertise a co-op program that they were wanting to recruit for. So that was very beneficial to us to have that connection. A benefit that not many people thought of initially was that you could consume alcohol and not worry about getting home. And also the club is not liable for anything that would happen if alcohol was consumed in an event. It was also easier to host events in before times when you would want to serve alcohol in an event. There was a form to fill out with SAIT and it had to be cleared, etc. So it was a lot more streamlined and easier to host events, and it was up to people as to individually decide if they were going to or not. Online meetups were also easier to attend. Just in general, it was more accessible for distance and international students. No distance students previously were members of the LIT club because they were simply not there to attend the program. And we were able to include 2 international students who actually became executive members, one in the US and one in the UK. So we definitely broadened the reach simply by being able to be online. We were able to test and prove the success of virtual club meetings, both the executive board leadership meetings and the social events. And next year's club will likely include an online component, even if in-person resumes. To sum up, we have a few key conclusions for you.
So the first key conclusion is to simply experiment. Try different things and don't be afraid to change things if they don't work. As we stated, we changed platforms multiple times to find which ones worked, and we ended up using 2 different platforms for different events just because of the way that they worked and what we needed. We did a movie night, so it wasn't as successful as we had hoped, and through the multiple games we tried, Scriblio became our go-to. So don't be afraid to try new things, experiment, and don't be afraid to fail either.
Another key conclusion is connectivity. If people cannot see, hear, or otherwise connect, they lose interest in your event very quickly. In part, this is why we gravitated to Zoom for the executive board meetings and to Discord for social game events. They simply work best for that, and we were able to include the most people with those 2 platforms. We also learned that to be successful, third spaces do not have to be physical. In fact, we believe going online resulted in higher event participation in most cases. Next, we have some thoughts on what we could have done if we'd had more time.
So there are always times that we look back and say, woulda, coulda, shoulda. And a few things that we thought of were that we wish that we had more time to organize lightning talks or mini presentations during our LIT times. Our president did a mini presentation on the history of tea for one of our LIT times, and it was very enjoyable. We just wish that we had planned more of them. We also wish that we established a code of contact in the Discord community. This would ensure that the Discord community was being used in the right way, people were being respectful, and if there was anyone who was not adhering to the code of contact, they could be removed from the server. We also wish that we had tried more games like trivia, made use of break rooms or Google Forms or polls, and games like Factile. There were a lot of games that we would have loved to do, and we just feel like we could have made time for some of them. We also thought about how we could have incorporated a movie or book club element to it, which would have been fun. And of course, because we're library information technology students, books are our life.
So finally, we have a few recommendations for you for online clubs or other third spaces. Leverage your online presence. Even when we can gather in person once again, we believe offering some online options will greatly help with accessibility and inclusivity. Also try to accommodate different socialization styles. This can be aided by the platform you choose. Chat always seems to be used in conjunction with audio and video participation if people are allowed to choose it. And regarding chat, if possible, have at least two hosts, one to manage the vocal conversations and another to help acknowledge those participating in the chat so that everyone feels included. Brittany, did you want to cover the last two?
Yeah, so another good recommendation is to, if you can, have a central place for communication. So a free space that can be easily accessed by everyone, and they can see and access information about the club, upcoming events, and be in contact with other club members. The last one is to have a succession plan. It is important to focus on the club and running it and putting on events, but it's also important to look to the future. It's really important for you to ensure that the club is not only handed over to someone, but that they are also given the tools to succeed. We ensured that everything that we learned was passed on to the next year executives and left them with ideas and opportunities to integrate online and in-person events in the future and to basically make it their own. So at this time, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you so much for your time. Joanne and I would also like to especially thank the Marigold Regional Library System and Kaylee for inviting us to present to you. And our last slide in our PowerPoint contains some links to resources that we use throughout the year. Some require you to create an account, some require payment, but a lot of them are free to use and are very fun, especially Scriblio. Thank you again for your time.
That was awesome. Thank you for providing us that recording. That was really good. Yeah, so now I would like to invite anybody with any questions. Please feel free. Use the Q&A panel to ask questions. Yeah, just let us know what you thought. Anything.
Could I add? We use Discord with the club, but just recently I've started. I mean, these aren't new platforms, but for professional use for professional purposes, I've also signed on with Slack, and it seems very similar to Discord. And I have to they really both work in the same way. And it seemed like before Discord was the choice amongst gamers and Slack was more professional. But I think Discord, if anybody's looking, Discord seems to be taking a bit more of a hold in the market there. Or the free app market. It just if somebody's wondering what platform, of course age, there's a demographic there too. When I say gamers, that's going to be, your 14 through probably people in their 20s, and then Slack is generally taken up amongst older professional people.
Interesting. Oh, and Audrey just had a comment that she thinks it's wonderful that you guys were able to bring first and second year students together. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was great. Brittany, it's funny, hey, we didn't we didn't get to know a lot of the second years when we were in first year, and you'd think being virtual and everybody isolated that we would have gotten to, like, we would have not seen anybody from either, like it was hard enough to get a hold of people within our own year.
Yeah.
But we collaborated with a lot of them. Like I have friends now from that are starting in the fall and texting and asking questions about options and things. And I think it was super successful.
Yeah. And that was the one thing that we really wanted, just because, like Joanne said, when we were in first year, we had that disconnect, and we didn't really know a lot what of it was from. But the first thing we were like, we have to get these 2 years together and working together and be there for each other, because that's important, especially during the online environment. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. When I went to SAIT, to the LIT program, that's late 90s. Yeah, there really wasn't any interaction between first years and second years. So I think it's fantastic that you guys
right.
do that.
Well, it's a cohort, right? So you go through
Right.
with your own group. You don't share classes.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to see a first year in your your
right.
Biblio 3 class. It's just not going to happen. So it's not a natural connection. You kind of have to go out. You have to make an effort. You have to figure out how to do that.
That's great. We have had a question come in. Given that first year students had never met in person, did you find you had to work harder to get them involved and stay involved? And did they stay involved?
That's a good question. I don't know if we necessarily had to work harder. I think it was more, like we had said, it was just getting that communication across. There was a few of them who, after Christmas break, actually really started coming, because they all of a sudden, the first years who did start coming before Christmas were like, oh, you should actually come. And they're like, oh right, I forgot about that. So I don't know if it was necessarily harder, but I actually find it was actually easier in some ways. I don't know, that sounds weird, but just because, in person, especially for our year, I think we had like a couple times when people all of a sudden mentioned that the club was having something, and we're just like, okay, and then we forgot about it. But especially with Discord, like all the first years were on Discord, a couple of second years were on, so every day someone was talking about something, so it was actually easier to connect, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brittany. It was. And I think the first years, it was really interesting. The second years, I think, sort of had to get our heads around the whole online thing more, because we had been in person. The first years, it almost seemed more natural to them. They sort of went into it thinking, okay, this is what we have. And like you said, Brittany, it was once some of they kind of word of mouth marketed the club. And Discord Discord's so funny. It can be so customized with the different channels. I don't know how familiar people are with it, but you can set up channels for this, that, and the other. And there was one, actually, it was not just the club, but just other groups of students were using Discord. And there was a Nicolas Cage meme channel that had a small following, but a fiercely loyal following. Yep. And it didn't matter if you were in first or second year. If you were in that group, you were, intimately connected with the other Nick Cage fans.
Yeah.
So it was, I don't know. I wasn't in that channel. I popped in every now and again and said, what's going on in here? So it's a way to find a way to connect. So you don't have, you can, if you find out, you need that space, so you can have people gather and say, oh, I love reading horror too. And let's do a book club, or, people can kind of make their own way. Like we said, it wasn't super structured. We wanted people to find their comfort zone and their common interests on their own, sort of under the umbrella of Lit Club.
And another question here. Glad to hear the LIT Club will continue with some element of blended to allow distance students to continue to be a part of the LIT Club. Do you have any plans yet that you can share?
Well, we've graduated, so we literally just talked to our first year executives who are now going to be second year students, and just said, we were able to get a few of the distance students. They seem to really like that connection, and they all agreed that they really want to keep that going. So whether it's in person or online next year, it's theirs now, and I think they've decided that at least once a month they'll have an event, but they might continue the LIT time as well, because a lot of people actually really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the feedback I have is the LIT time will continue for sure. That's definitely a commitment they're making. I don't know about the time and the place, but I think they're committed to that, and they want the auction again too. They really we all had fun with that. It was great fun. So hopefully it was competitive, fiercely competitive. Very
competitive.
So again, it was just another way to bond with each other without being there in person. So definitely they like the games. Again, what games they choose is going to be up to them. Maybe they might do something, they might get a Jackbox or something, an account, I don't know. But for sure, tea time, for sure an auction, and some kind of game event. So hopefully that answers the question as best as we can, right, Brittany? Yeah. We've handed it over to our children.
They also did say that they wanted to include some alumni, so we don't know what that's going to look like either, but there could be a chance for that to happen too. So
that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, all alumni. I think that would be. I had a great time meeting the distance students.
Yeah,
that was an awesome idea. That was Donna Campbell's idea actually to reach out to them, and we said,
she was very much a huge part of us being able to connect with them. So thank you, Donna.
Yes, thanks, Donna.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to include the distance students, because I've done classes here and there for various things where it's distance, and you feel very isolated, like it's just you in a tiny little bubble. So I think that's a really wonderful way to include them and get them to feel more part of the larger whole.
Definitely.
Yeah. Is there any thoughts of welcoming other LIT students from other institutions?
I think that's a great idea. I think we would have to do it outside of SAIT though. I don't know what their rules are for that, but if they talk to SAIT, then you never know. We could have some sort of connection there. That would be great.
I think they could. Because we can connect with industry, that would be a natural link to other institutions. That should have been on our woulda, coulda, shoulda page. Right? That's a great question, though. I think
I love the idea.
It's a great idea. That could be a monthly event, right? That could be, of course, and we've already integrated time zones. We had the UK and Seattle, and we had to find a time that everyone could meet. So there's a challenge there for sure, but you can overcome that. Yeah.
Figure something out.
You know what? I will text somebody about that. I have somebody in mind.
Yeah. We'll see if we can make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Just subtly, voice from the past.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's any other questions, please feel free. Use the Q&A panel. I wonder about ALT, if that's something, if somebody has a connection with ALT, if that's something that they could put together.
Yeah, that's a good idea too.
For sure. That was a goal I had. We all got free memberships to ALT in the past year, I think. So that was awesome. There weren't a lot of events that I was made aware of. FLA did for sure, and they reached out to us. Again, there's so much potential there, especially if we can go back to in person and do volunteer, at Calgary Reads or whatever events that people volunteer with, and link into the students, because I know a lot of students volunteer for various things. ALT is definitely another group to stay in touch with, basically. Yeah, no, that would be great. Okay, there doesn't seem to be any other questions, so I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. But thank you so much for joining us live so that we could have this conversation and
have this interaction and get these questions. That was wonderful. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you again for allowing us to be here and do it, because it was a lot of fun for us to put together. So,
No, that's
Yes.
fantastic.
Thanks so much, Kaylee. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to share. I love that. So awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. See you again.
Thanks.